Marcus had retired from the force 2 years ago. After 15 years of chasing criminals through the streets of Chicago, all he'd wanted was peace, a quiet home in the suburbs, a grill, and his crystal-clear swimming pool. But peace was impossible with her next door. Claire. The woman thought the neighborhood was her playground. Every weekend, when she assumed Marcus wasn't looking, she snuck into his backyard to swim in his pool. She was bold, too, wearing expensive sunglasses, sipping from his fridge, acting like she owned the place. Marcus warned her. Politely at first. Then firmly. But Claire just laughed. "Relax, officer," she'd said. "It's just water." But it wasn't just water anymore. One humid July evening, after finding her footprints on the wet concrete again, Marcus decided enough was enough. He still had connections, old evidence, chemicals that never made it to the official reports. And besides, a little something extra in the water might finally teach Claire some respect. The next morning, Marcus poured a vial of translucent liquid into the pool. Odorless, tasteless, but deadly over time. A toxin no doctor would trace without knowing exactly what to look for. He covered the pool, went inside, and waited. By noon, he watched through the blinds as Claire, wearing that smug grin, slipped over the fence and dove in. 20 minutes later, she stumbled out of the water, coughing violently, clutching her stomach. She left without her usual arrogant strut. Claire never came back to the pool again. Within a week, her house was suddenly listed for sale. No more loud music. No more stolen swims. No more Claire. Marcus sat on his porch one evening, sipping sweet tea as the sun dipped below the trees. Peace, finally. And the best part? When the cops came to ask if he'd seen anything unusual, Marcus just smiled the same way Claire used to. "Relax, officer," he said. "It's just water." Weeks passed, and the quiet felt like a reward. Marcus took his morning coffee poolside, enjoying the calm that had finally settled over his little corner of the world. Claire's house sold faster than he expected. By the end of the month, a new couple had moved in, quiet, young, the kind who kept to themselves. Perfect. But peace has a way of making a man lower his guard. One night, as cicadas hummed in the thick summer air, Marcus sat on his porch flipping through an old crime novel. The first noise was soft, just a faint scrape near the back fence. He paused, listening. Silence. Then, another noise, this time the unmistakable splash of water. His heart tightened. Slowly, Marcus stood and walked to the edge of the porch. The pool shimmered under the moonlight, disturbed by gentle ripples. For a second, he thought maybe it was the wind. But then he saw her. Not Claire. Someone else. A woman, pale and thin, floating just beneath the surface like she'd been down there far too long. Her hair spread out around her, eyes open but dull. Marcus blinked, rubbed his face, looked again. The pool was empty. The next morning, Marcus drained the pool. Every last drop. He scrubbed the tiles until his hands bled. Bought fresh filters. Refilled it. Just to be sure. Just to forget. But the dreams started after that. In them, Claire stood at the foot of his bed, water streaming from her hair, lips blue, skin wrinkled and soft from too long submerged. She didn't speak. Just stared, as if waiting for something. Marcus told himself it was stress. Guilt, maybe. Not that he regretted it, he didn't. But still. There was something about the way she looked at him in those dreams. Like this wasn't over. Then came the letter. No return address. Just folded into his mailbox one morning, written in blocky, uneven handwriting. "It's not just water anymore." Marcus didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Days blurred. He thought about draining the pool again. Filling it with dirt. Selling the house. Disappearing like Claire did. But before he could decide, there was another splash. This time, when Marcus went outside, the pool was empty. Still. Silent. But a wet footprint led from the pool deck to his back door. And it wasn't his. Marcus stood frozen on the threshold, his pulse hammering in his ears. The footprint was small, delicate, barefoot, and glistening under the porch light. It led straight to the back door, where the lock he turned every night without fail hung slightly ajar, as if someone had just stepped inside. He didn't remember drawing his old service weapon from the lockbox, but there it was, cold and familiar in his hand as he crept through the house. Room by room, nothing. Just the faint smell of damp air clinging to the walls, like the scent that lingers after rain. And then he heard it. From upstairs. A soft dripping sound. Slow. Steady. Marcus moved quietly, his breath shallow. At the top of the stairs, the bathroom door was wide open, the light buzzing faintly above the mirror. He glanced inside. Empty. Except for the tub. Full. Overflowing. Water spilled onto the floor, pooling at his feet. He hadn't used the tub in months. The faucet was still running, gurgling like something alive. But it wasn't just the water that stopped him cold. It was what lay floating inside. Claire's sunglasses. The same oversized designer pair she always wore when she lounged by his pool, the ones she'd left behind that last day. He'd thrown them out. He was sure of it. The letter had said it, "It's not just water anymore." Marcus shut off the faucet with trembling hands. He didn't bother cleaning up the mess. He packed a bag that night, clothes, cash, the gun, nothing more. By morning, he was gone. Left the keys on the counter, the front door unlocked, the for sale sign out front. But the road didn't help. New towns, new motels, new faces. Every night, the dreams followed him. Claire, dripping and silent, waiting by his bedside. Sometimes he woke up choking, lungs burning as if he'd been underwater. And sometimes, just sometimes, he swore he could taste chlorine on his tongue. A month later, the house sold again. The young couple never lasted. Neighbors say the new owners found the pool full when they arrived, though Marcus had drained it before he left. They also say it's always full now, no matter what anyone does. Full, and waiting. They say no matter how many times it's drained, the water comes back by morning. Clear, still, perfect. Almost like it's inviting someone in. The couple moved out after just 2 weeks. Nobody talks much about why, but the story goes that the wife woke up coughing up water in the middle of the night. She hadn't been near the pool all day. Now the house sits empty. The lawn's overgrown, the shutters hang loose, and the for sale sign creaks whenever the wind picks up. But the pool? Oh, the pool is pristine. Cleaner than it has any right to be. Crystal clear, like it's been freshly treated. The surface never ripples, even on windy nights. And sometimes, just before dawn, neighbors swear they see someone standing at the edge. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the pale light. Some say it's Marcus. That he came back, or maybe never really left. Others whisper it's something else entirely. Because Marcus never made it far. Authorities found his car parked at the edge of a reservoir a few towns over. The driver's door was open. Keys still in the ignition. His bag on the passenger seat, untouched. But no sign of Marcus. Just wet footprints leading from the shore into the water. And no footprints coming back out. They dragged the reservoir for 3 days. Found nothing. But every so often, on humid nights when the air is heavy and the moon hangs low, people driving past that old house say they hear the faint echo of someone whispering from the backyard. "Relax, officer. It's just water." Years slipped by, and the house slowly rotted where it stood. Vines strangled the gutters. Birds nested in the broken chimney. But the pool, hidden under its heavy, rusted tarp, never cracked, never filled with leaves like it should have. Like it wouldn't allow itself to decay with the rest of the property. Then one autumn, a developer bought the lot. Some big investment firm from the city. Word spread fast, plans for demolition, new homes, maybe even a whole row of them. Fresh paint. Fresh start. The crew showed up on a cold morning in October. Machines lined the curb. Men in bright vests stomped through the overgrowth, laughing, shouting orders, tearing down the front door like it was nothing but cardboard. By noon, the house was rubble. But when they got to the pool, things started to go wrong. The tarp had fused somehow to the concrete. Took 6 men to rip it free. And when they finally dragged it off, the pit beneath wasn't empty like they expected. The pool was full. Perfectly full. But the water wasn't clear anymore. It was dark. Thick. Almost black, like oil or ink. No one could see the bottom. No one wanted to. The foreman told them to drain it before the excavator rolled in. Hooked up the hoses, fired up the pump. It ran for 10 hours straight. By sunset, the hoses were bone dry. The pump burned out. But the water never dropped an inch. The next morning, 2 workers didn't show up. Vanished. Left their tools right where they'd been. Phones, wallets, untouched. Last anyone saw, they were standing near the pool at the end of the shift. After that, no one wanted to finish the job. The developer tried to hire new crews, but the story had already spread. One guy from the next county overlasted less than an hour before he bolted, saying something about hearing voices coming from inside the water. That night, the fence went back up. And the lot stayed empty. For sale, sure. Cheap, too. But nobody even calls anymore. And people who live nearby say the pool's different these days. Sometimes they see ripples even when there's no wind. Sometimes they hear splashes when the street's dead silent. And sometimes, just before dawn, if you get close enough to the fence and look hard enough, they say you can see 3 shapes floating just beneath the surface. Waiting. Winters came and went, but the pool never froze over. Snow piled high around the lot, blanketing the ruins of the old house and swallowing the streets in silence, but the water stayed dark and smooth, undisturbed by the cold. Like it wasn't part of the same world anymore. One night, during the coldest week of January, a boy from the neighborhood broke in. Nobody knows exactly why, a dare, maybe, or just the wrong kind of curiosity. They say he was quiet, the type who kept his head down. His name was Kevin. 14. The next morning, his bike was found leaning against the fence. The back wheel still spinning in the breeze. By noon, the cops were combing the property, but there wasn't much to find. Just his shoes, neatly placed side by side on the pool's edge. No prints in the snow. No sign of anyone climbing back out. The pool was full, as always. Black water, perfectly still. The search lasted 3 days, until the snow started falling too hard to see. No body, no struggle, no trail. Just gone. And from that point on, the stories changed. Now people say the pool takes who it wants. Doesn't matter how high the fence is or how many locks are on the gate. If it wants you, it'll find you. And you'll know it when you start hearing the whispers at night. Not words. Just the sound of water moving somewhere it shouldn't be. In your kitchen sink. Behind the shower curtain. Under your bed. And when you finally go to check, when you're standing there listening to the silence afterward, that's when you'll notice the faintest smell of chlorine. And that's when you understand. It's already chosen you. You won't be able to leave town. You won't be able to outrun it. Because it's patient. It's always been patient. And sooner or later, you'll find yourself standing at the edge of that pool. Shoes off. Looking down into water so dark you can't see your own reflection. And from somewhere below, you'll feel them waiting, Marcus, Claire, Kevin, the others you never even heard about. You might even hear them whisper, one last time, just before you fall forward into the dark. Relax. It's just water. After Kevin, the town changed. People stopped letting their kids ride bikes past the old fence. Real estate agents pretended the lot didn't exist. Google Maps blurred the property out, like some glitch no one bothered fixing. And the stories got worse. Truckers passing through claimed they saw figures standing at the gate at night, lined up in a row, motionless and dripping, watching cars pass by with those dull, bloated eyes. Sometimes 3 figures. Sometimes 4. Sometimes more. And eventually, even those who lived closest to the property started leaving town without saying goodbye. Quiet moves. Quick sales. New owners who never lasted long. Then came the drought. That summer, the whole county dried out. Crops failed. Reservoirs shrank to puddles. Grass went brown and brittle. But not the pool. The pool stayed full. And that's when people started noticing the water looked different again. No longer black, no longer ink thick. It was clear. Crystal clear. You could finally see the bottom. And what was down there? They say you can make out faces now, if you stand close enough. Faces just beneath the surface, eyes open, mouths slightly parted like they're whispering things only the water can hear. But it's not just the pool anymore. Things have started happening miles away. Sprinklers turning on by themselves, spraying out water that smells faintly of chlorine even when the systems are shut off. Faucets filling sinks in locked houses. Toilets overflowing with water so cold it frosts the porcelain. And always, before it happens, people say they dream about the pool. Not standing beside it. But sinking into it. Feet first. Dragged slowly down by invisible hands, pulled deeper than the pool should even go, as if the water stretches on forever, like a black throat swallowing them whole. And right before they wake up, gasping and cold and slick with sweat, they hear Marcus's voice, calm and low, so close it feels like he's standing beside the bed. You can't fight it. You're already ours. The pool waits. And it's getting closer. It wasn't long before people realized leaving town didn't help. One family, the Parkers, packed up in the middle of the night. Didn't even bother selling their house. Just threw bags in the car and drove west, not stopping until they were 4 states away. Thought they'd escaped whatever curse the pool had stirred up. But 3 weeks later, their youngest daughter was found sleepwalking. Into the hotel courtyard. Toward the outdoor pool. She was standing at the edge in her nightgown, eyes wide open but seeing something far away, something only she could hear. The water was rippling, though there was no wind, and when her father yanked her back, she whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear. They said it's almost ready. The Parkers kept driving after that, but it didn't matter. Wherever they went, water started following. Bathtubs filling on their own. Motel pools glowing faintly at night. Rain puddles forming perfect circles around their car no matter how clear the skies were. Until one day, they just disappeared. A maid found their hotel room empty. Beds made. Luggage gone. Car parked out front with the keys still in the ignition. Only thing out of place was a faint trail of wet footprints leading out of the room, down the hall, and into the shallow end of the pool. After that, people started whispering the pool wasn't just waiting anymore. It was growing. Reaching. Spreading through pipes and drains, storm sewers and rivers. Every faucet. Every lake. Every drop of water carrying the same pull. The same voice waiting at the bottom. People started sealing up their bathrooms. Refusing to shower. Bottled water only. No swimming. No baths. Washing machines left dry and gathering dust. Didn't help. The dreams kept coming. And the whispers got louder. Now people are saying the pool was never just a pool. That Marcus didn't make it what it is, he just woke it up. Claire was the first to touch it after it opened its eyes, but the rest of us? We're just next in line. And once it's taken enough, once there are enough of them down there waiting, the water won't stay in the ground anymore. It'll come pouring through the cracks. Filling the streets. The houses. The world. And when it does, there won't be anywhere left to run. Because when it's ready, when it's finally time, we're all going to hear that same voice. Right behind us. Right next to our ear. Relax. It's just water. The water spread faster than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just pools or pipes anymore, it was in the air, in the fog that rolled in from nowhere, thick and heavy, clinging to streets and doorways. People began to notice it more and more, tiny droplets forming on windows, on mirrors, like the world was sweating out something that shouldn't be there. It was the towns with the smallest populations that felt it first. Quiet places. Old places. Where the air smelled of rain even when there wasn't a storm. The local wells ran dry, only to fill again with dark, viscous water that no one could explain. The rivers rose with no rain to feed them. And in the dead of night, the pools, those long-abandoned pools, seemed to whisper a little louder, a little clearer. Come closer. It's almost time. People who heard it went missing, the same way Kevin did. The same way the Parkers disappeared. No sign, no trace. No struggle. Just gone. But everyone knew where they'd gone. Down into the water. The local government tried to act. They issued evacuation notices. They told people to leave, to get away from the pools, from the rivers, from any body of water at all. But the problem wasn't just the pools anymore. The problem was that the water had started to move on its own. One by one, homes started flooding with water that hadn't come from anywhere. It crept in through the cracks in the floors, the walls, the ceilings, seeping through the smallest gaps. No leaks. Just water. And no matter how much they tried to drain it, it would rise again, clear and dark, until the whole house was submerged. And in the water, always, the same figures. The ones that hadn't been there before. The ones who couldn't leave. Marcus. Claire. Kevin. All of them. Standing, floating, waiting. And now, the whispers were louder than ever. You should have known. You can't hide from it. In every home, in every town, in every place with water, the whispers grew. And it wasn't just the voices of those who had gone into the pools anymore, it was something else. Something deeper, darker. Something hungry. People stopped hearing only Marcus's voice. They started hearing dozens. Hundreds. Everyone who had disappeared. Everyone who'd fallen into the water, drowned or pulled under or just taken, had left a part of themselves behind. All those voices mixed together, now a collective hum, all calling at once. All waiting. Relax. You're already ours. And when people began to understand the truth, that it wasn't just the pools that were calling, but the very water itself, their panic only grew. It wasn't about being near the water anymore, the water had already come to them. It was everywhere now. Then, one night, the flood came. A storm. A massive one, unlike anything the world had seen. It rolled in fast, unexpected, and for hours it rained so hard, so relentlessly, that it seemed like the sky was trying to drown the world. Rivers burst their banks. Streets turned into torrents. But the strangest part wasn't the flood itself, it was that, just before the water rose too high, everything went silent. No thunder. No wind. No birds or animals. Just silence. And then, the water stopped moving. Perfectly still. And for the first time, it wasn't just the whispers. It was a voice. A single, calm voice that seemed to echo from everywhere, from the very surface of the water itself. It's done. We're here. In the silence that followed, people stared at the water, frozen. The reflection in the pools and puddles was no longer their own. It was the faces of those who had gone into the water, the ones who had drowned, the ones who had been taken by the dark depths. All of them, floating just beneath the surface, waiting for their moment. And it didn't matter anymore where you were. The water had reached you. It had already found its way inside your home, your life. And when the flood receded, when everything went quiet again, you would hear the whispers once more, clearer than ever. Relax. It's just water. And you would know, deep down, that it wasn't just water anymore. And then, there was nothing. The floodwaters receded as quickly as they had come, leaving behind only the remnants of a world that had been drowned. Roads cracked, homes torn apart, but the pools remained untouched. Full. Waiting. Those who had survived, the ones who hadn't gone into the water, the ones who hadn't heard the whispers or felt the cold hands beneath the surface, left in a hurry. They fled to places far from the towns that once were. But even then, there were rumors. Strange dreams. Cold sensations in the dark. The feeling that, no matter how far you traveled, the water would follow. And in the distance, people began to talk about the days that came after the flood. The quiet, eerie days when things seemed too still. Too calm. They'd hear the sound of ripples in the air, faint as if coming from an unseen pool, and it would stop them dead in their tracks. They couldn't explain it, but the pull to return to the water, was stronger than ever. The pools had risen. The water had claimed what it wanted. And now, there was no place to run. Somewhere, in the deepest corners of the world, those voices, the voices of those who had drowned, who had been taken by the water, began to hum a low, constant song. Relax. It's just water. But it wasn't just water anymore. And that's when they knew, it never was. It was the end.